Welcome back. It's 11:25, so we're going to move on to our next session now. I'm going to have a chat to Rashik Parmar. Rashik is a CTO at IBM, and we're going to talk a little bit about what the CTO is responsible for. Well, we've called it "Is the CTO Responsible?", which can be read with a number of different inflections, and perhaps we'll cover some of that nuance in our conversation. So we call this a fireside chat. We have no fireside, but if you could just imagine one, that'd be lovely. So Rashik, can we just ask you to introduce yourself a little bit for us first?
Yeah, hi Brian, welcome everybody, and delighted to be here. As you said, I'm IBM. I'm actually an IBM fellow and vice president for technology, so effectively IBM CTO for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Been doing that for a few years now. Been in IBM over 38 years now, so I've seen a few changes, you can imagine.
Lovely. Thank you, Rashik. So we're going to have a chat now. As I said before, you're more than welcome, ladies and gentlemen, all attendees, to put questions into the Q&A if you would so desire. If you want to ask Rashik awkward questions, then I'm more than happy to pass them on. But let's start off with a fairly awkward one, shall we, Rashik? CTOs appear to have lost some ground over recent years in terms of maybe kudos and so on. Why do you think that's happened?
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think it's almost at the same time as the need for architecture, need for design, as things become more and more complex, decisions on IT become more complex, then you need a CTO to make sense of it and help cope with all that complexity and come to terms with what's right for the business, the organization at that moment. And I think as we had this, well, the answer is cloud, now what's the question? The role of the CTO transformed quite a lot. And I think as we went through that, CTOs were really kind of pushed to one side. We don't need to worry about it. We know we're going to cloud because that's the only way. So let's go figure that out.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. Now, what we're going to discuss is some of the research that you've been doing over recent years. So you've done a couple of big chunks of research with CTOs. And one of the things that you did discuss is some of the regrets they might have had. So fill us in a little bit there.
Yes. Yeah, so when I say we, I felt that the CTO was in the resurgence probably about 3 or 4 years ago. When we started with just a small survey interviewing 20 CTOs, we built that up to last year we went out and interviewed 100 CTOs. This year we're actually surveying 2,500 CTOs, so it's a much bigger piece of work, and the growth is really linked to the importance and the criticality of the role in shaping the digitization agenda for organizations. And in the surveys, as you said, we were quite cheeky. We asked them, what do you really have authority? Are you really responsible? And we also asked them, what decisions do you regret making? And what's interesting, that what was kind of consistent in those conversations is CTOs you really regret sort of not getting into technologies early enough, right? They can often see the potential of the technologies, and they often sit back and want the technology to mature and really be ready. But that then means that they're a little bit on the back foot. So it's that balance between not going too early when it's too immature and you're going to waste loads of effort, but not waiting till it is mature when it kind of seen as we're not getting the same competitive advantage. So getting that balance right is a really tricky challenge. And so I think that having enough investment in experimentation, in trialing the right things and placing those bets, because their budgets have all been squeezed, so they've all got limited bandwidth and really trying to focus on it. So it really comes back to regretting not getting the decisions just right, I think.
I mean, I find that quite interesting in that we don't want to paint with too broad a brush here, but most techies are interested in new stuff and always on the lookout for novelty, aren't they? Do you think CTOs, perhaps because they're a bit higher up, get a little bit more cynical and perhaps respond a little bit more slowly to changes?
Well, I think they've kind of experienced a lot of should we say sales bravado? and they know how to cut through. I mean, you can always take anything and make it look much better than it really is. And they want to go beyond the kicking tires. They want to really understand the content. They want to know whether this is real and how appropriate is how effective would it be in their business. And I think the CTOs are really a fine balance between the here and now, positioning for the future, and delivering business transformation and business change. And it's that kind of juxtaposition, those three things that they're trying to balance. So yeah, of course they want new technologies, and they have the teams coming along, and it's like the old, bouncing bunny rabbits coming with all fresh ideas. They have the teams that are all excited about all this latest stuff, but they keep them pointing in the right direction, reminding them what is it we're really trying to achieve? How are we going to drive that transformation? What's the potential new business model here? What's the potential new platform we're going to build? What's the new client experience we're going to deliver?
So it's like cutting through the vaporware, but without losing your enthusiasm for the role.
Exactly.
That's the balance.
Exactly. And I think that I have to say, of all the roles, I think the CTO role is great, because you have that. You get all the early insights on what's going on, and is quantum going to make a difference? Is it really going to make everything fantastic? Is the next wave of this cool bit of AI going to do it, or is 5G really? So you've got all that excitement, but also you have the motivation and value of being close to delivering real business impact, right? Mm-hmm. So they can sit back and say, I built that platform, and the business is really now in a solid place because of that platform that I've been able to build.
So let's move on, Rashik, to the ethical side of things. Now you've got your backdrop is responsible computing, being future ready. This is an IBM initiative. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, and then we can talk about the ethical considerations that CTO definitely needs to take on board, and what his level of involvement there is.
Yeah. So the whole reason for us reaching out to CTOs was to understand, where are the big decisions they're making? Where are they placing the bets? And is there some consistency across that? So over the last 3 years, I've gone out and interviewed many CTOs as part of the program. I've done colleagues. And so Future Ready for us is a kind of brand for our technical community within IBM. And we talk about them having a mindset of 5 different things. We want them to be ambitious. They want them to be bold, willing to reimagine. We want to be capable, skilled to succeed, and so on. So there's a bunch of things there. But what was really fascinating last year with the interviews was, the CTOs talked about all these cool decisions they're making and how they're placing the bets. But there were a set of anxieties, and they really struggled with putting words to that. And they talked about things like, are we doing enough around sustainability? I'm not sure. When I think about the infrastructure, should we be doing more around reuse and optimization? When we think about the data that we're custodian for, am I creating some kind of unintended consequence because that data could be used in ways that I couldn't imagine and have a huge impact? Have we really thought about whether that data is inclusive? Is it AI explainable? So there's a whole bunch of questions. And in the report, which I produced, actually on my LinkedIn, by the way, so people go and find it, we have the decisions, but we also have distilled the questions from the CTOs into a set of broad frameworks. And that's what responsible computing is. So at the foundation, it's about, what does a responsible data center look like? What's responsible infrastructure? What is responsible code, and how do we think about code in its sense of, not only is it secure and dependable, but does it also have that thought about carbon footprint? Is it efficient? All those kind of things as well. Then there's data use, responsible systems, which looks at the whole ethical question: are these systems appropriate, and so on. And then there's responsible impact. Are we using technology to help make the world better, and kind of living up to BCS's ambition and vision of IT for good, right? It kind of links to that as well.
Yeah, lovely. So I'm thinking too about I'm going to use a hideous expression now, about things being front of mind. Do you think that the ethical considerations and those sustainability ideas are high enough up the agenda? Or I've got two cliches now. Are they high up enough up the agenda for the CTO? What's your view?
I think all CTOs want to do something, but actually they struggle with knowing what to do and how to do it. Right. So part of what we're trying to do with responsible computing is provide some some frameworks and structure. There's a worry that I have, which is people are greenwashing or ethical washing or whatever the right phrase is, and they're just paying lip service to it to get everybody off the backs. And CTOs, I think, generally are more authentic than that, and they do worry about the longer term impact, right? So I have to say I'm very encouraged listening to the CTOs, because they're really thinking through this, and they don't want to just do this for the sake of doing it. They want to do this because it's going to make a difference, and it's going to really help create that IT for good. And to a certain extent, they're also saying, are we at a moment where we do need to recreate trust in our IT? Right?
Yeah. Now, a CTO, of course, doesn't do things in isolation, and even just putting to one side however big their IT department might be, there's also the interaction with the CIO, the CEO. What's the ideal point of interaction there when they're talking about the ethical dimensions of an organization?
Yeah, and I think you're right, because ethics is a really difficult topic. Ethics has an element of employee morale and engagement. It has an element around cost and value to the business, and it's got a big element around brand. I mean, those are part. That's not the whole picture, but it's part of the picture. So when we look at the whole ethical question, the CTO is really there translating this into, look, if we get this wrong, the brand impact is this, right? And that's where the CEO really worries and cares about that brand impact and that kind of future. The CIO is often worried about, look, if I have to go and do this ethical stuff, is that going to mean that all the projects that I've committed to deliver aren't going to be delivered on time? Am I going to be able to deliver the business change on the time scale and timeline I've committed? How is that going to work for my workforce? And so the CIO is very much about the execution and ensuring the IT delivery stays within the right boundaries, but also worrying about the ethical impact of that as well, right? So, and I would say of all of those, the CTO is starting to become the custodian of being much more responsible in the use of IT and stepping up to own that ethical discussion and really have some very hard conversations around, this isn't ethically the right thing that we should be doing, right? And I think the notion of our CTO is responsible, I think that has two parts of it. I think CTOs need to be responsible for restoring the authenticity, trust, and credibility of IT organizations, because it has been damaged, and I think it's been damaged by cyber security hits. It's been damaged by, time after time of project failures. It's been damaged because of not delivering the impact of technologies. So there's a bunch of things. And I think CTOs are now really at the table saying, if you want to have the impact of digitization and you want to do that in an ethical and a sustainable way, then I really need to be at the table, and I will be accountable for that, and I will be responsible for driving that agenda.
So going back to our sort of starting point here, that perhaps the CTO has lost a little bit of profile in recent years. Is your feeling that that's actually coming back, or are you just seeing movements in the community you've spoken to that show that the right decisions are now being made?
I think the CTO is back. And I think CTO is now really the person who is owning and driving the digitization agenda. And I think as we come out of COVID and businesses start to reassess what the future of work looks like, they reassess the future of the business, I think CTOs are right in the driving seat. And I think the CTOs that are able to span the technology agenda, the digitization agenda, the ethical agenda, and the business agenda are the ones that are going to succeed. And I have to say, in all my conversations, the CTOs are really stepping up to the mark there. Okay. I think it's very, very encouraging for me.
That's interesting. So in your view, what is it this is a question we like to ask in our IT leaders survey, right? What keeps IT leaders up at night? In the sustainability area, what do you think keeps CTOs up at night at the moment?
I think it comes back to the 6 domains that we talked about. It's not just one thing. They do worry about the sustainability. They worry about data use. They worry about the security and the vulnerabilities that they might be creating. And they do care a lot about the enduring impact of IT. right? And that enduring impact of IT really is the driving force for what CTOs do.
Now, that sounds like a difficult balancing act. Do you think there's a reasonable way to prioritize those things, or have we just got to do them as streams together?
I think the way the CTOs are behaving is that they're doing, I would say, two broad things. They're doing one set of things is, where do I start to build the bridges for the future, and placing the bricks on the journey piece by piece, and they're kind of looking at what's the next appropriate brick, and at the same time looking at the fires they've got to fight and pouring the water on the fires. And I see their day kind of split into those two things. What's positioning for the future, and what am I doing to keep the fires, calm? They're not putting all the fires out, because I don't think you can. So they're keeping the flames at bay and starting to plot a path out to the future.
I mean, you're painting a quite encouraging picture. Yeah, I can feel your optimism coming through, which is good to know. Because our next talk coming up in a couple of minutes, I'm going to introduce our director of professionalism. It's about just the whole idea of being professional in everything we do, and this is key, isn't it, in this particular area? I wonder if I could just ask you, as a final question, Rashik. If you were going to give a rallying call to CTOs now, perhaps there's some CTOs out there now, just trying to plot the way ahead. What was your rallying cry for CTOs as a cohort?
My rallying cry would be, embrace being the responsible computing provider for your enterprise, because that's, you are the custodian for that, the trust, restoring that trust in IT. And if you want to talk more about that, come back to me, connect with LinkedIn or whatever. But I think there is some very clear values that you should adopt, and use those values to create the level of professionalism we need in the organization, because it's needed now more than ever.
Okay. That's been a really interesting chat, Rashik. Thank you for sharing that with us. So now just remind us where we could see the full research, because I think some people are going to be thinking, I'd really like to read that.
Yeah, so if you connect with me on my LinkedIn, so Rashik Parmar on LinkedIn, the article that's pinned is called Architecture Decision Points. And in that paper, you'll see all the details. And if you can't find it, just drop me a message. I respond pretty quickly. So I'll connect with you on any form of any social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever.
Lovely. Thank you. Any final thoughts, Rashik? Thank you so much for your presentation, for your chat.
No, my final thought is, we have to, be grateful for CTOs because they are taking on a big agenda. But look, let's support them, because I think the CTO is here to stay and here to really help us make IT good for society.
Okay, lovely. Well, look, we've appreciated you taking the time there. If only we had a real fireside, perhaps we'll get a little
maybe next time.
Yeah, an animation for next time. So thank you so much for speaking to us, Rashik. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.